Well, I mean, there's some strange coincidences, and sometimes, some things you can't really rule them as coincidences because they just weren't controlled by man. Actually, most of the time when you see coincidences, yeah, not most, generally, it's because it's man-made. The coincidence is not really a coincidence, it's man-made. This is a given. Some things we can control, and some things we can't control. It's that simple. And here's some odd coincidences that I've been noticing, is that there's a theme, that the town of Cassiar, British Columbia, that town, it was a private town, a very small town, it was like 500, I think 1,500 at best, the population 1,000, maybe not even. It was like maybe 700, it was 500, 700, it was small, tiny population. I mean, and the high school where we're like, I don't know, 75 students, it was a tiny, tiny, tiny place. But strangely enough, there are a bunch of families that come from lines of twin makers, come from lines, the families that come from lines that had their kids kidnapped, or twins, or multiples, or just their babies kidnapped. They come from the lines of of those families, and there were a lot in the town of Cassiar. And actually, in asbestos, there seemed to be quite a few more and more over the last years. I don't know, there were some in the past too. So, but Cassiar is the one that's kind of obvious the most. Cassiar, it's actually even baffling how many twins you could find there, and then for how many people that were related to, or, were descendants of other twin makers that had their kids taken away. A whole bunch of them. So, I'm only left to think that there's some kind of link between this privately owned mining town that mined asbestos, and I came from another mining town called Asbestos. And this town's bigger. This one, like 5,000, it had been a lot more at other moments, 10,000, maybe less, but not large populations. So there again, there's another coincidence, but is that really a coincidence? The people who would give the jobs out to those who went to Cassiar, would have come from generally probably where they worked in mines and in other places. So this is in the 80s when a lot of mines were closing down, and the ones that were closing down the most, well, everybody knows, the asbestos mines. So there would have been a lot of choices in employees. There would have been a lot of CVs being put out there. Sure, Cassiar isn't an ideal place to live because it's cold and it's in the middle of nowhere. It's like one road to go in, one road to go out. And 2 years after the town shut down, and they literally tore down the houses. And this is strange when and this is something they built a new high school, brand new. Must have cost millions. If not millions, it must have been pretty expensive. They built a brand new high school, and 2 years later, the town is shut down and tore down. Really? There's things like that. And so I would be left to think that the baby black market is related somehow to this town of Cassiar, this mining town, this private town, privately owned town. Who would bother making a new school? Seriously, yeah, sure. The old one was bad. It was falling apart most of the time. But you know what? Generally, it was still in good enough shape to be used. And what they did a lot is they added different parts to that school over the years. So, some parts were older, some parts were newer. So, that's the way it goes. And in the past they had situations with the school and having trouble because it was a bit old and, you know, but they still kept it open. It wasn't like, you know, they were planning to close it. And if anything, I mean, I didn't even remember hearing about the school being built. I think I heard about it. I think I did. But I mean, seriously, you build a new school to tear it down 2 years later? Brand new? I wonder how many times this has happened. I mean, does it happen regularly? There's an obvious link. Obvious link between the baby black market and this privately owned town, Cassiar in British Columbia. I almost think they did it on purpose to bring lots of these twin maker families and multiple baby families, these fertile families. I think they did it on purpose to bring them together. And I think, if anything, there were probably individuals, and these individuals would have been probably, you know, not necessarily the best people. Some of them would have probably been drinkers and partiers themselves. I don't know. Somehow there's a weird link. It's like the promiscuity in that town it was crazy sometimes. And you could say, oh, maybe it's because nobody had anything to do. But, you know, because there's so many twin makers there, you would think, well, maybe this is something they're encouraging. They're encouraging promiscuity between the teenagers and, you know, hoping that these teenagers will give them up, you know, on their own. I don't know. I don't know what their plan was exactly. And you'd think, well, was this party set up? I mean, I don't think it was. I think, if anything, maybe they made the GHB available. Maybe. I don't know. I can't be sure exactly. I somehow don't think that party was a setup, but it could have been a setup. But it was a setup by teenagers, and maybe not the people who wanted the babies. Maybe it was the people who wanted the babies who set it up. It's hard to know. But it's really strange. A lot of families in that little town, and I mean, it's like, I think like a large percentage of the population in that town were you know, related to families who had babies taken away from them, and who had babies taken away from them, and or were the kids of people who had babies taken away from them. So basically, you have, I don't know, maybe it's like the large part, maybe not, but it's like a large percentage. There's definitely a large percentage. So it means lots of these families in Cassiar, they have kids all over, or they have brothers and sisters, and they have cousins that they don't know because, I mean, they were kidnapped. So basically, what happens is that's the thing. Cassiar was definitely a town of twin makers, and it wasn't a coincidence. They were hoping for those babies, and they were trying to make it happen. You make a lot of money with black market babies. A lot. I mean, these parents who can't have kids, and they hear, well, I could find you one for the right amount. They have the right amount. So, like I'm saying, there's an obvious link.